Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a story of how Chile achieved the literal impossible. We're going to unpack the incredible true story of a nation that managed to successfully host the 1962 World Cup just 2 short years after suffering the most devastating earthquake in recorded human history. It's this wild tale of unimaginable destruction, sheer human will, and the bizarre duality of a beautiful national recovery paired with, well, some of the absolute ugliest football ever played. Okay, looking at this timeline, you can immediately see the staggering challenge Chile faced. In 1956, the mood was triumphant. They won the bid. But then, May 1960 hits, and the nation is thrown into a sudden existential crisis when the Valdivia earthquake strikes. Yet by 1962, against absolutely all odds, the world arrived in Chile to play football. This crazy short window between total catastrophe and a global celebration is exactly what makes this whole story so fascinating. How on earth did Chile host despite 1960? Let's find out. Section 1. The unexpected host. Now, it's wild to look at the massive disparity in the voting here. Chile won 32 votes to Argentina's 11. Going into this vote during the 1956 FIFA Congress, Argentina was the heavy favorite. I mean, they had the established infrastructure, a massive football tradition, the whole shebang. But the Chilean delegation, led by a man named Carlos Ditborn, delivered this incredibly passionate presentation. They didn't pitch their current infrastructure because, frankly, they couldn't. Instead, they pitched a promise. They argued that bringing the World Cup to Chile would fulfill FIFA's core mandate to develop football in underrepresented emerging regions of South America. And you know what? The Congress was totally won over. Section 2, the 1960 Valdivia earthquake. That ambitious dream was violently interrupted on May 22, 1960. The Valdivia earthquake struck with a staggering magnitude of 9.5. 9.5! That makes it the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in human history. To put that into perspective, this wasn't just a localized tremor that rattled some windows. It was a complete seismic cataclysm that fundamentally altered the geography of the entire region and sent tsunamis literally racing across the Pacific Ocean. The human toll was just absolutely devastating. Roughly 2,000 lives were tragically lost to the quake and those tsunamis that immediately followed. The entire country was plunged into a state of profound mourning, trauma, and complete shock. And the structural devastation, it was incomprehensible. Nearly 2 million people were left completely homeless. Think about that number, 2 million. Around 58,000 homes across the nation were completely destroyed. Entire communities were just flattened. Roads, bridges, the basic infrastructure you need to just keep a country functioning were completely wiped out in the southern regions. So the crucial point here is that Chile was left in absolute ruins. Unsurprisingly, FIFA strongly considered relocating the entire tournament to another continent. And honestly, from a purely logical standpoint, taking the World Cup away made perfect sense. I mean, how could a country that urgently needed to rebuild homes for 2 million of its citizens possibly worry about hosting a massive international sports tournament? The 1962 World Cup was hanging by a very thin thread. Section 3. We have nothing. The entire sporting world was asking the exact same question. How do you host a World Cup in ruins? There were massive doubts internationally. But internally, the Chilean organizers saw the World Cup not as this impossible burden, but as a critical catalyst. They realized that abandoning the tournament would be a massive, perhaps fatal blow to the nation's morale. Pulling it off, however, could actually unite and heal the country. This brings us to a pivotal moment of national defiance, led by Carlos Ditborn, the same guy who won the bid back in '56. He delivered this legendary, impassioned plea to FIFA, and it turned a desperate situation into an incredible rallying cry. He said, "Because we have nothing, we'll make everything." That single sentence convinced FIFA to let Chile keep the tournament. Tragically, though, Ditborn suffered a fatal medical emergency and passed away just 1 month before the tournament kicked off. He never got to see his miraculous vision actually come to life on the world stage. Section 4. Rebuilding for the world. To actually pull off this logistical miracle and host a global tournament despite the 1960 disaster, organizers had to get extremely creative and radically adapt their plans. The grand blueprint from 1956? Yeah, throw that out the window. Their first major workaround was rapidly slashing the original 8-venue plan down to just 4 concentrated cities. They carefully avoided the devastated southern regions altogether, focusing entirely on the north and the center of the country so they could stretch their extremely limited resources. Out of sheer necessity, their resourcefulness was staggering. They actually expanded the main Estadio Nacional in Santiago to hold 75,000 fans by literally tearing out a cycling track to squeeze in more seats. Up in the remote northern desert of Arica, they built a brand new 18,000-seat venue from scratch, appropriately naming it after the late Carlos Dipborn. And out of pure desperation, they utilized some of the smallest venues in World Cup history, like a tiny 14,000-seat stadium in Rancagua that was originally built by a local mining company.
They even had to get creative with housing. With limited hotel infrastructure, they ingeniously repurposed industrial mining facilities into team bases. Take the England squad, for example. They were housed at the Braden Copper Company Staff House, nestled way up in the Andes at a 2,500-foot altitude. It was originally built for mining executives, and it gave the team a pretty unique experience. Right in the middle of an active copper mine area, they enjoyed wooden bungalows, a private golf course, and, wait for it, a 10-pin bowling alley. It's a perfect example of how Chile used whatever existing infrastructure they could scrape together to accommodate the globe's biggest stars.
Section 5, the battle and the glory. But when the tournament finally kicked off, this deeply inspiring story of rebuilding was heavily contrasted by the dark reality of what actually happened on the pitch. Tactically, teams were so defensive it resulted in a record-low average of just 2.78 goals per match. But more alarmingly, the games were defined by unprecedented, extreme physical brutality. Even the great Pele wasn't spared. He suffered a severe groin injury in his second match and was ruled out for the rest of the tournament. Luckily for Brazil, their magical winger Garrincha stepped up, dazzled the world, and led them to a 3-1 final victory to secure their second consecutive title. The absolute lowest point in sportsmanship, though, was the infamous Battle of Santiago. This was a group match between the host nation, Chile, and Italy. The hostility actually started before a ball was even kicked, all because foreign journalists were heavily criticizing Chile's post-earthquake conditions. Once on the pitch, the first foul occurred literally 12 seconds in. 12 seconds! It quickly devolved into a full-on brawl with punches and flying kicks. The English referee later said it felt more like umpiring military maneuvers than a football match. Armed Chilean police physically had to drag Italian players off the grass. A BBC commentator famously dubbed it the most disgusting exhibition of football in the history of the game.
Section 6. A legacy of resilience.
Yet despite all the ugly football that plagued the event, the tournament ended up being a massive, unifying triumph for the host nation. Driven by the passionate, emotional energy of the home crowd, the Chilean team absolutely shocked the world. They advanced out of their group, upset the highly favored Soviet Union in the quarterfinals, and made it all the way to the third-place playoff against Yugoslavia. In that match, a dramatic 90th-minute long-range goal from Eladio Rojas sealed a 1-0 victory. To this day, it remains Chile's highest-ever finish at a World Cup, and as you can imagine, the entire country erupted in joyous, cathartic celebration. So, it leaves us with this fascinating duality that is just absolutely essential to understand. On one hand, we witnessed one of the most brutal, cynical iterations of the beautiful game, completely marred by injuries, defensive tactics, and literal fistfights. But on the exact same token, we saw a nation showcasing the absolute best of human resilience, honoring the words of Carlos Dipborn by making everything out of nothing and uniting a traumatized populace through the shared joy of sport. I'll leave you with this provocative thought to conclude our explainer today. Considering Chile's impossible logistical miracle to simply get those stadiums open, do we sometimes focus too much on the game and not enough on the ground it's played on? When we watch a massive global event, it is so easy to just fixate on the final score or the fouls. But the 1962 World Cup reminds us that sometimes the greatest victory of a tournament isn't who lifts the trophy at the end. It's the sheer, miraculous fact that the tournament happened at all. Thanks so much for joining me on this incredible journey, and keep asking those deeper questions.